The hardest task in getting any deal across the line in Northern Ireland will, of course, be getting the different communities and parties to agree, and then to get back to the Stormont Assembly. The toughest nut to crack in this is the leading unionist party, the DUP, which says there must be fundamental change and they won't rejoin power sharing until their requirements are met. Other parties have been deeply critical of that approach. The Cross Community Alliance Party amongst them, and its leader, Naomi Long, joins me now live from Belfast. Good morning, Ms. Long.
Good morning.
Now, you met with the Prime Minister this week, despite the fact that I gather they sent your invitation to the wrong place. You did eventually manage to get together. Did you come away from that thinking that a deal could be done?
Well, I think the Prime Minister certainly was reassuring in the sense that he was speaking positively about how the negotiations were going, but he was also realistic about the fact that there was a lot of work to do. And in Northern Ireland, we perhaps better than anywhere else understand that you can be 95% of the way to a deal, but it's the last 5% that is often the hardest bit to finish. So near, but it's still very far. I think until a deal is over the line, until it's agreed, we really won't know the final outcome. But from our perspective, we wanted to communicate to the Prime Minister the importance of listening to all of the parties in Northern Ireland and recognising that over 70% of people in Northern Ireland support remaining within the single market, want to have dual market access, and that is the bottom line, irrespective of the DUP's tests. That is the bottom line for the majority of people in Northern Ireland.
In that final 5% that you referred to, who and what is in that box, do you think? Where are the final obstacles?
Well, I think that there are some of the issues. I was listening to Lord Mandelson, and I think he very clearly set out, for example, the issue around a democratic deficit, the need for the EU to engage with Northern Ireland parties. I have to say, the EU have been very willing to do that. In fact, they wanted to set up an EU office in Belfast where they could do that. And it was the British government that stood in the way of that and objected. So I hope that that will be dealt with as part of the discussions. But also, I think issues around, for example, the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice is likely to be one of the sticking points. In order to remain part of the single market, there are certain things that we have to adapt to in Northern Ireland, and one of those is around where the final point of decision making on disputes will be. This is a fairly high level discussion. Unionism treated as though it is a constitutional issue. I think most businesses, I think most people treat it as though it is a pragmatic solution to a problem that needs to be resolved. If there are disputes, trade disputes or other disputes between Northern Ireland companies and those in the rest of the EU, there has to be a court that has jurisdiction in both in order to be able to resolve those. But I'm a pragmatist in this. If the EU can find a solution to this intractable problem along with the UK government, then I think that's something we would all welcome. But I wouldn't want it to be blown out of proportion. The reality here is that no business in Northern Ireland has been coming to me in a cold sweat, worried about the jurisdiction of the ECJ. What they're worried about is their ability to continue to trade into both markets and then to exploit that dual market access in order to grow our economy and bring prosperity to the people of Northern Ireland.
Is it your point that an economic or trade problem and a practical problem is being turned into a constitutional issue and doesn't need to? I know that you told my colleague Sophie Ridge on this programme previously that the DUP are holding the people of Northern Ireland to ransom. Is that what you mean?
Well, both. I think, first of all, these are not constitutional issues. In the Good Friday Agreement, it was set out very clearly how the constitutional position of Northern Ireland would be changed. It would only be with the express consent and will of those who live here. And that has not happened. There has been no referendum on that. So we remain part of the United Kingdom, and unionism should be secure in that. I think in terms of holding the people of Northern Ireland to ransom, absolutely that is the case. The DUP walked away from functioning institutions. They have left us without a government and now without ministers. And so we are in a rudderless ship, essentially, on pretty choppy waters when it comes to the economic and financial situation facing Northern Ireland. So, I mean, we have no leverage, if you like, in the debate with the EU and the UK, other than the persuasiveness of our argument. But I think it's wrong to collapse the institutions. There is no good reason why we could not have functioning institutions and, as an executive, collectively speak to the UK government about what the majority of people in Northern Ireland want, about the concerns we have around the heavy-handed bureaucracy of the protocol, and at the same time be able to move forward with the pragmatic politics that needs to be done in terms of reforming our health service, delivering education, and improving our justice system.
Well, in a way, that takes me on to an underlying question I wanted to ask you to address. The arrangements for democracy in Northern Ireland are really ruled by the Good Friday Agreement. Now, we've had two lengthy periods where essentially there has been no devolved government, once because Sinn Féin wouldn't sit, once because the DUP won't sit. But they're able to achieve that outcome because of those arrangements under the Good Friday Agreement. Is it your view that at some point soon we're going to have to reconsider whether that is the best way to run Northern Ireland's administration?
Well, I think that the principles of the Good Friday Agreement of inclusion, of equality and of fairness, of working together are still the right principles and have stood the test of time over the last 25 years. However, I think that as it's been described, the ugly architecture of our structures and institutions here, which have embedded sectarianism and division, I think do need to be reviewed. My own party's growth is evidence that this is not a binary community. You're not either unionist or nationalist. There are lots of people who are unionist, nationalists, and many other things as well. So from our perspective, we think that a review of the Good Friday Agreement structures is long overdue. We need to do that in order to ensure that we have stable government. You've referred to two lengthy periods of suspension. We have actually had now 3 lengthy periods of suspension, plus a number of other very unstable periods in the last 25 years. And I think when something isn't delivering what it said it would in Strand 1, Paragraph 1, which was stable, devolved government for Northern Ireland, then we have to go back to the drawing board with the institutions and look at what can be improved. We have put forward fairly modest proposals in terms of how those structures could work better in order that parties could be still, based on their mandate, part of government. But if they choose to opt out, they can't prevent government continuing. And I think very few would opt out if they thought government would go on without them. They opt out because they know that it brings everything to a halt. And I think the government, irrespective of whether a deal is able to be achieved with the EU that satisfies the DUP's current demands, I think the government needs to do that reform of the institutions, because inevitably there will be other political problems that emerge down the line which could destabilise it in the future.
Okay. Naomi Long, thank you so much. I know that we'll return to that in due course, but thank you.